Howdy friends, it's me, Amy from Amygdala Vids. So I don't know about you guys, but I like watching bad movies on purpose. There's just something funny about a serious director and crew members, but a product that probably doesn't go in the intended direction. So around a month ago, I'm scrolling for one of these bad movies and I come across God's Not Dead, which I saw some scenes of earlier and I thought were pretty funny. This isn't a movie review channel, so I won't go into the goldmine of memes we have here, but instead, I want to deal with a ridiculous but kinda interesting situation. So our main character takes a philosophy course, but unfortunately, the class is taught by Hercules, and he makes it known immediately that he's a strong atheist and believing in God is stupid. He even brings out this list of big intellectuals who are atheists, and oh boy, there's a lot to say about this list. Anyway, just like any great philosophy professor does, he immediately forces his viewpoint onto the other students by making them write God is dead on a piece of paper, sign it, and then turn it into him. Now some critics think this is an absurd scenario, but I don't know. I remember when my ethics professor made us do the same thing except write Little Caesars Pizza is trash. So our goody two-shoes protagonist refuses on the basis that he is a God-loving Christian. But Hercules won't have it. He says that because Disney Channel over here won't write God is dead, he has to take up the opposite position that God is not dead, and then defend the position in class while the professor hammers him with his own critique. At the end of the presentation, the class will judge who succeeded, and if Hercules wins, Disney Channel loses 30% of his grade. So I'm gonna admit, I did like the whole debate thing going on and the arguments from each side. Yeah, make fun of me all you want in the comments, I don't care, I like judging arguments. I want to ask you guys, however, what would you do in that situation if you had to defend the position that God is not dead? Doesn't matter if you're a theist, an atheist, or like me, an agnostic. What is the best possible defense that you could give to defend your grade and impress the hot person in the class? Well, here's my attempt to deal with that problem while also introducing the idea of God presented by the philosopher Baruch de Spinoza. So Professor Hercules, you tasked me with defending the position that God is not dead. However, you didn't even define God in your challenge. I mean, what kind of philosophy professor are you? Everyone knows philosophers have to spend at least 8 hours defining their terms, so your lack of definition for God puts the ball in my court. And as for me, I would like to use Spinoza's definition of God, quoting definition 6 of part 1 of his book, The Ethics. By God, I mean an absolutely infinite being. That is, substance consisting of infinite attributes, each of which express eternal and infinite essence. Yeah, big deal. I'm sure all religions think of their God as an infinite being, so what? Well, what would a truly infinite being actually be? Spinoza doesn't think this means some dude transcendent from our universe expressing his will onto it from afar, but rather, Spinoza thinks that if this God is infinite, they would have to be literally everything in the universe, the totality of being. Spinoza's famous phrase is Deus sive natura, translated into God or nature. And by nature, we don't mean trees and raccoons as we conventionally think in nature, but rather literally everything. Even things that we consider artificial, like phones or PlayStations, would be included in nature. God and nature are then two interchangeable terms referring to the same thing. Whoa, what the hell? God is the totality of everything. If God and nature are interchangeable, then why not just call it nature? Why do we have to call it God? Well, hey, I'm not saying you have to objectively call it by a specific term. I mean, language is complicated as is. You could call it nature, but then you get bogged down by the Animal Planet ideas of nature. You could call it God, but might get bogged down by conventional ideas of a god. Either way, you're screwed, but for me, the totality of all things seems so grand, so sublime, that I believe God is an acceptable name. And this is an incredible shift in philosophy because it focuses on the immanent rather than the transcendent. I mean, before Spinoza, a lot of philosophy focused on what wasn't immanent to us, like Plato's theory of forms or a Christian God. Spinoza's bringing God into the world, into what is immanent to us, so we live with God in a sense. So what? If everything is God, doesn't that mean that I am God? Well, it's not a thing in the world that is God, but rather a thing in this world, or a mode as Spinoza calls it, is an expression of God. So in Spinoza's book, The Ethics, which I would highly recommend, he writes in a very structured way. He starts with defining his terms, something you forgot to do, Professor, then moves on to explications, axioms, proposition, proofs of these propositions, etc., etc. So in his definition section for part 1, I would like to turn the class's attention towards modes, substance, and God. By substance, I mean that which is in itself and is conceived through itself. That is, the conception of what does not require the conception of another thing from which it has to be formed. By mode, I mean the affections of substance. That is, that which is in something else and is conceived through something else. By God, I mean an absolutely infinite being. That is, substance consisting of infinite attributes, each of which expresses eternal and infinite essence. So we got the situation with modes, which again are things in the world like books, fishing poles, Happy Meals, even you, Professor. And the situation with modes is that they have to be conceived through something else. So here's an example. Professor, explain to me what a pencil is. Well, a pencil is a writing instrument that uses graphite to write. Now we got an issue here, Professor, because you've used other things such as graphite, the action of writing, and the word instrument to conceive of the pencil. Those things are required to conceive of the pencil. And yet, doesn't this apply to all the other modes in our world? You can't explain a pencil without writing, like you can't conceive a guitar without strings. You can't conceive strings without the concept of being thin. And you can't conceive something of being thin without the concept of something being thick in comparison. It's like looking up a word in the dictionary, finding words to explain that word, then looking up those words and repeating the process. So where does it end, class? Substance. Remember, as Spinoza said, substance does not require something else to conceive of it. It is conceived through itself, and that substance is God, or nature. An infinite being that doesn't require another thing to conceive of it. Kinda reminds me of Thomas Aquinas' first mover argument for God, how everything seems to need a cause except God, who is the only substance and is infinite. God does not require the conception of another thing to be. God simply is. God simply exists of their own nature. And God, the only substance, then expresses themselves in modes. Therefore, there's a part of God that is in the modes, but it is not totally in one mode. So to answer your question, Professor, yes, God is in you, but you are not the totality of God. God is in everything, the totality of things, God or nature. Well, folks, there's more to Spinoza. We didn't even talk about attributes, determinism, or his actual ethical ideas. But hopefully I presented you with a case that God is not dead. God is in everything. The modes or things in this world is very much alive. Therefore, God is not dead. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Spinoza's God or your own arguments, if you had to make one, for the proposition that God is not dead. Leave your thoughts and arguments in the comments below. Comments below? What the hell is he talking about? I don't know, but this all sounds like crap. But class, it's time to take a vote to see if Mr. Amygdala loses 30% of his grade. Yeah, I vote for the professor. Yeah, professor. 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 Yeah, professor. Well...